So what's the whole issue about pensions? If you're a young person, maybe in school or have been working for years, you need to take this very seriously. It can make or break your retirement. Our guests joining me for the discussion this afternoon. Dr. Isaac Bampo Ado, who is Executive Secretary of ClockSAC, will be joining. Bright Rekubrobe, who is Deputy Employment Minister, would also be joining. And then Dr. Kwabena Donko, who is member of the Employment Committee of Parliament, will be joining. Right now, Seta Blaso, who is a labor consultant, has joined. And Francis Salah, who is the Deputy General Secretary of TUC, has also joined. I'm grateful for your time, gentlemen. Before we go into that conversation, I'd like to share with you a few figures why you should understand the importance of SNIT. So according to SNIT, just as you heard there, there's an increment for all pensioners on SNIT pension payroll as at 31st December. So this is the increase. The fixed rate is at 9.68%, whilst the redistributed flat amount stands at 3 cedi 44 pesos. So this is it. What does the 10% overall indexation rate mean? It means that there's an effective increase for the lowest earning pensioner. It's 10.38%, which is 332 Ghana cedis, 48 pesos. And then the highest earning pensioner will receive effective increase of 9.683%. And you've seen the figure there, over 142,000. Now, if you look at management of pension funds, the National Pensions Act 2008, Act 766, it makes a lot of provisions. Now, it provides for a contributory three-tier pension scheme and the establishment of a National Pensions Regulatory Authority to oversee the administration and management of the pension scheme. So when the Auditor General's report came and it talked about a lot of malfeasance and mismanagement at SNIT, one of the questions people ask is, why is the regulator sitting down for all of this to happen? Why didn't it check some of these issues and set up measures to deal with them even before SNIT goes haywire? Now, under the Act, SNIT is to manage basic national social security scheme, referred to as the first tier of the contributory three-tier scheme. We will understand that soon. The management of the pensions funds, which is captured under Act 766. This is how it breaks it down. Tier 1 is a mandatory basic contributory social security scheme managed by SNIT. Tier 2 is a mandatory fully funded and privately managed occupational scheme. And mind you, from the leaving from Tier 1 to Tier 2 has raised a number of issues, with SNIT having to pay some amount of monies to people who were supposed because they have stopped paying some amount from Tier 1. So those here have to be paid some amount of money. We'll be looking at the past credit issue because SNIT has had to stop paying lump sum. But what is SNIT saying? SNIT says that it will collapse if it pays that past credit. We'll be looking at all of that when we begin the conversation. Tier 3 is a voluntary, fully funded and privately managed provident fund and personal pension plan. So this is how it is. Management of pension funds, contribution rates under the Social Security Scheme, Tier 1. Employer pays 13% from the worker's basic salary. The worker, him or herself, pays 5.5% from the basic salary, totaling 18.5%. Now look at, so that's for the first tier. Now look at this. Out of the 18.5%, the employer remits 13.5% within 14 days of the ensuing month to SNIT. 5% is remitted to the second tier mandatory occupational scheme. Now, subsequently, SNIT also gives 2.5% out of the 13.5% to the National Health Insurance Authority for the members' health insurance. What does this even mean? If you don't use national health insurance, what does this mean? I have all the people here. They'll be explaining that to us. Now, according to the reports released by the Auditor General on public boards, statutory institutions, SNIT has more than 440 million locked up in non-performing investments. And the question again is, Does SNIT consult us, the contributors, before making investments on our behalf? Bear in mind that when they take those decisions and they go bad, we are the people who bear the brunt. So do we have the right to know what kind of investment SNIT does on our behalf? We'll be discussing that in the conversation. This amount is out of 1.8 billion of cash irregularities the report uncovered. And according to the report, SNIT registered a total loss of $11.79 million from the liquidation of 3 of its investments, with a total cash outlay of $14.768 million. The question again is, what has the regulatory body done? How do we regulate SNIT's activities? I mean, we have a national regulatory body. Why is it not checking some of these things? Why is the poor contributor, the ordinary contributor, suffering for this? We'll also have a discussion on the informal sector, where there's a provision in the pensions law that the informal sector must be given the opportunity to also contribute towards their pension. But is that happening? No, it's not really. I mean, there's some improvement, but we need to do more. Let me put this straight to you, Mr. Blaso. I'm grateful for your time. Between 2005, 2006, I mean, we saw the last pension reforms. From that time up till now, have we made any headway?
Thank you for having me. It's been a difficult day. Many workers expected improved pensions with a reform that was instituted, and which led to the new pensions law from PNDC Law 247 to National Pensions Act 2008 at 7 census. But clearly, if you do a survey, many members are utterly disappointed with what the reforms have turned out to produce. They expected better pensions, more money, and financial security in pension. That is not the case. So it's led to the situation where many are asking, did we go or did we come? Because even with the introduction of the 3-tier pension scheme, we have the situation now where persons who went on pension in the year 2000 and 2001 are far worse off than their colleagues who went on, far worse off compared to their colleagues who exited with PNDC Law 247. So clearly, the reforms has not benefited members of the scheme. And I want to underline the fact that contribution is an obligation of membership. So members of the scheme are utterly disappointed. And even though not long after his appointment, the current Director General indicated that SNIT will improve the standard of living of pensioners. There is no evidence to show that the standard of living of pensioners has improved. In fact, pensioners are among the category of persons who can be categorized as suffering. And in fact, we have also among them also the pension poor. And that is why, unfortunately, you find many persons attempting to alter their age when they are nearing pension. In other jurisdictions, workers look forward to pension. They look forward to the freedom in pension and relaxation in pension. It is not the case in Ghana. So we need to rethink the reforms. And let me add also that even for those who suffered such reduction in what they expected in the year 2020 and 2021. Even as we speak, the promise that was made by government to top up to levels of.
All right, so we are having a bit of a challenge with the connection of Seth Ablo, so we'll try and get him back. Thankfully, Francis Salah. Okay, is he back? All right, so Francis Salah is Deputy General Secretary of the TUC. Mr. Salah, I'm grateful for your time. What has been the complaints of workers about the management of SNIT, of the especially Tier 1?
Okay, so first of all, the Deputy General Secretary for the General Transport, Petroleum and Chemical Workers Union of TUC.
All right.
On the issue about complaints from the membership, you and I can bear me out that if you want to go on a decent pension when you retire, what it means is that what you pay in should be enough to be able to give you a good return. But you bear me out clearly that the level of salaries of Ghanaian workers today is nothing to go home with. You have very harsh economic conditions affecting every worker here and there. And at a time when you are even exiting on the pension, you'll be found wanting. Clearly, if someone who has been on pension in the last 5 years, you have a friend. If you know of somebody who has been on pension in the last 5 years, the person tells you how much he's paid, he or she is paid at the end of the month. That person perhaps has maybe one or two children in school, would have no other options of any other income whilst on the pension. Literally, that worker or that retired worker would need to be begging for funds to support his or a child as we speak. The level of salaries that we are paid in this country, how many of us will be able to even put up 1 or 2, 3 bedrooms even before we go on retirement? We have heard about this 10% increase in pension. But I tell you, if you compare that to the economic conditions that people are in now, it is woefully inadequate. I've had a few friends calling me this morning to tell me their difficulties, and even with the increment that has come, what can we do as the labor front? We are kind of in an everyday cycle of problems. You don't know where to start from and where to even end. But I think that until we workers begins to take issues up seriously, whilst we are working, one of the craziest things that I find it is that once we are working and our attention is being drawn to the problems we are having with the pension, people don't seem to be interested so much until 2, 3 years when they are about to go on the pensions, then, or sometimes even a year. Then that is when the reality dawns on us that, I'll be going on pension soon. How am I going to earn a living afterwards? I have this responsibility. I don't even have a place to put my head. I have that to do. And it becomes a lot of problems. People think through this and they die slowly. And it is one thing or the other that workers face every month. And this is an unending thing. Your information, you even put it on the public indicates that what SNIT is saying they've lost almost about 400 billion on investment. Who is in charge of what? Is the regulator ensuring that had earned money that is supposed to be invested for us. Who is ensuring that whoever lost that money through whatever form of investment, are we sure that those in charge are being held liable? And what are we doing as workers? You and I talking right now, in the next couple of years, we'll be going on pension. If we don't see to these problems, if we don't ensure that these monies that are being lost in the wind, they say investment, this kind of investment, and you ask the question appropriately, are we consulted anytime they want to go into the market there? No. So if you don't consult me, the money is mine. And if you go and you don't make it, I bear the crunch, I bear the consequences. Yet when you are going for this investment, I don't know, have any idea about it. Nothing is told to me. But when the losses come, I am then made aware. There are a lot of problems going on in Smith. Unfortunately, you hear up to a point, they've arrested that, they've arrested this, and at the end of the day, how many of them have we seen behind the bus? Over the years, the problem is still there. We should be careful in this country. Except that we've allowed politics to divide us so much that what we, the voters, what we will go home with when we retire, we don't seem to care so much. It is that people that we give job to when we vote for them, their issues is what we want to be talking about every day, forgetting that the very thing they are supposed to do for us, they've managed to divide us so much so well that we have now become uncivilized in our own politics. This is the result that we are paying for it.
I'm happy to be joined by Dr. Justice Yankson, who is Vice President of the Ghana Medical Association and also a member of the National Pensions Regulatory Board. I'm grateful for your time, Dr. Yankson.
Welcome, Isa.
Dr. Yankson, we're here discussing what has become of our pension, because some 16 years ago, we wanted to do reforms that will ensure that we go home with better retirement packages. Is that what we're seeing right now? No. I'll start with the Auditor General's report, which has indicated that SNIT has more than 440 million cedis locked up in non-performing investments. How does this come across to you?
Well, I mean, the findings of the Auditor General will always be subjected to a lot of debate, and it is also the responsibility of Parliament through the Public Accounts Committee to look at the detail and bring sanity into the space. So I think that crisis is something that we are all concerned. The sustainability of the scheme is very important. As an individual, if I should retire and God forbid the scheme is not sustainable, what it means is that my pension is going to be in jeopardy. So as much as possible, whatever the Auditor General has found, we need to go into the details and ensure that whatever we can salvage, we do save, and then going forward, we don't repeat the same mistake, if any. Of course, people also have to take responsibility for certain actions if it is deemed that their actions were not in the right direction. But that would be the subject matter for another day. But the most crucial bit for me has to do with the sustainability of the scheme and the prudent management of affairs going forward.
What do you think from the way we're going? Is it sustainable?
Well, you see, the issue is that we went into this 3-tier pension reform to provide the best for the retirees. And that would be the ultimate goal as far as pension arrangements are concerned. If you look at the Tier 2 scheme, for example, within a relatively short period, I would say relatively short because for most of the schemes, especially those in the public sector, And it's only somewhere 2017 that they started really, in fact, even not the entire 2017, somewhere, I think November, December. So technically speaking, it's just about 2018 till date that they have been really managing the funds the way the law envisages. Either through most of the funds were locked up in what we call the CPFA, the sort of investments that were done, if you look at it genuinely, yes, they were safe, but T-bills don't give the sort of returns that the schemes are enjoying now. What it means is that within that period, from 2010 to 2017, they couldn't maximize the possible returns that they could get. But at least the tier 2 bid is really encouraging now. If you look at the statistics, their asset base and all that keeps rising. The good thing about it is that you also have a situation where through the MPRA investment guidelines and the management arrangements in place, overheads are capped at a maximum of 2.5% of the fund. We would need to look critically at tier 1 as well and see if we can actually cap the administrative and overhead charges. Because going forward, we need every single CD or PESWA to go to the employees who are the ultimate beneficiaries. The scheme belongs to the workers. It is not for anybody. So all attention, all focus should be aimed at ensuring that the workers actually get the best out of it. But the most important thing is that we have a society where, unfortunately, majority of the persons are actually in the informal sector. And if you look at the balance, those in the formal sector, as we speak, are covered to some extent by the pension arrangements, especially the mandatory component, which ultimately seems to give them something, whether good or bad, at the end of the day, when they retire, they get something. But the large chunk, which is the informal sector, still do not benefit from any pension arrangement. And that is one thing that the law envisaged and created a tier 3 arrangement, as well as the informal sector tier 1 pension arrangement within SNET. And I think that these are things that we need to take the bull by the horn and make sure we do the right education to get people to understand that it is important to have a stake in pensions so that your future at least will be guaranteed to a large extent. And then the managers of these pension schemes will also have to provide their best or produce their best for the people on whose behalf their funds are being kept and managed by them.
Definitely, tier 1, 2, 3 have had their own challenges, especially transforming from tier 1 to tier 2. And you know, tier 1 is being managed by SNET. We'll be talking about all the tiers and the challenges we're facing there. But the issue about SNET investing the contributors' money and hearing about 440 million, going out there, going waste out there. The question is, what does the law say? Act 766. What does it say? Do I have the right as a contributor to know what kind of investment SNET does on my behalf?
Well, every contributor, technically speaking, has a stake, and we should all be interested. But of course, SNET has its own arrangement for going into investments and what have you, and that naturally might not be something that on daily basis individual employees or workers generally can actually know the basis for some of these computations. But it is instructive to note that if you look at the operations of the MPRA, investment guidelines are provided for the tier 2 and tier 3 schemes, and it is supposed to guide them so that people don't invest anywhere at all. It is all about ensuring fair and just returns, as well as also protecting the funds. So I think that if you look at the law clearly, the MPRA also has a duty to make sure that ultimately SNET is also one that is governed by some form of investment guidelines and investment decisions. I'm sure SNIT, having been there as an entity all these decades, will know the best form of investment to undertake. But clearly, over the years, we keep hearing these reports. I'm not privy to the entirety of the Auditor General's report, so I cannot speak about the details. But like I said earlier, the most important thing is that we need to look at it. We should not just discount it or discard it and feel that, oh, all is well. If there is an inkling that we need to do a lot more, we need to ensure that same is done. And then ultimately, the MPI's regulatory authority will also have to come to the fore. And its full force and brand will have to be on the management of it as well, because that is the duty of the regulator, to ensure that the sound investments that we all require are being done. And I'm sure, and I know that the MPI is working with me to ultimately come out with some form of investment guidelines, looking at what they have now in place and what the future also holds for us. Let's also not forget that pension funds ultimately are also very important when it comes to national development. If you go elsewhere, Canada, virtually a lot of the Western countries, most assets that social services run on, roads, railways, what have you, actually owned by pension funds. So it is something that can also develop our country properly, and we need to start looking at it. I know the MPI has been very proactive, especially with tier 1 and tier 2 and 3 investment guidelines. The new one that has been released actually points in that direction, that, look, ultimately, national development is key, infrastructure development, and what have you. You can see the inkling in there, and those are some of the things we should look at. But, of course, with all the due care, caution, and supervision that will be required from the regulator, very, very paramount when it comes to discussing these things.
Dr. Yanks, I'll have you hold for me, because there are also issues of past credits and the issue of lump sum. There's also the issue about data and what have you. Hold on for me there. Let me bring in Seth Blaso. Mr. Blaso, who should we blame for this mismanagement at SNIT? The regulator?
Well, first, the management directly, but the regulator shares a blame. Because you see, in the year, when was it? In the year 2017, Labour Policy International, a Labour policy think tank with which I'm associated, submitted to the NPRA a forensic audit of SNITs conducted by Deloitte and Touche and Worldwide Investments in the year 2000. The report of which no action had been taken. And it showed huge sums of thievery, more than what the Auditor General is talking about today. So the report was presented to the NPRA, if they hadn't seen it, to attempt at least to recover the stolen monies that were identified. Monies that have been misappropriated and stolen from SNIT. Nothing, as we speak, has been done about it. So you ask, what is the regulator regulating? Are they shy of going after persons who misapply SNIT funds? But again, also moving forward, it will be important for us to, whilst looking at assessing the performance of Act 766 thus far, to remove the general indemnity, that's Section 206 of Act 766, grants to persons in charge of SNIT or pensions. If you grant indemnity, political interference will extract monies from SNIT. People will strategize, loot SNIT funds, and share. and nothing will come out of it because they are indemnified. So these are critical issues that we need to look at because people are bleeding in pension. But people steal and get away with it. In the report that I'm talking, they did nothing about it. And that report, a copy of that report has it that management, the report asked management, state management, to be asked to explain their decision to declare a loan a bad debt without recourse to the collateral provided for the loan. And clearly, for some of these things to go on, they can only go on through political interference. So going forward, the other proposal is that a Director General of State should not be appointed by a president. A Director General of State should respond to advertisement for vacancies, for a vacancy in that top position. Applications be invited, and then the Public Services Commission or whichever commission shortlists and interviews persons that are qualified and available to work in that position. Because the political interference is too much. It's far too much. And workers and pensioners are suffering for that.
Mr. Francis, are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
All right, Mr. Salah. So, Mr. Blaso has made the point, and I'm happy he talked about the fact that people mismanage contributors' funds and they go scot-free. Now he's talking about interference, political interference in the management of pension scheme. What exactly, and how do you want the regulator to go about this?
You see, if you look at the Act 766 very well, it gives the president the authority to even appoint the Director General of SNIT with a certain benefit in a certain letter known only and can be issued by the president. Can we ask ourselves, that is the president a contributor to SNIT? And that we, those who are members who are contributors of SNIT, don't even have a say as to what are the remunerations and the terms that would be issued to the Director General. That is one of the interesting aspects that Brother Blaso is coming up with. The very interference that we all have in the system. If you look at Section 67 again of the 766, which talks about the investment of policies, there are supposed to be a board of trustees who are supposed to do certain things. Are they doing it? If you go straight again into the Section 178 and 179 of the 766 again, the very restrictions on investment and sale purchases or disposal of pension fund assets. There's supposed to be board of trustees who are supposed to supervise and oversee some of these things. Aside the fact that we're interested in appointing the Director General as government, as those who are supposed to govern us, the board of trustees and co, are they also doing their job? I mean, what interest do we really have against or for the worker? And until we ourselves begin to question these very things that are ongoing, the very interferences that we are having. We have several labor organizations. The very one that we know of is the TUC. Does the TUC have a say to who is appointed as the Director General of SNIT? The access is the president. These are the very things. Our money is over 400 million Ghana cedis is lost. The person who appointed the DG what are we telling that person? Because we are appointing someone who is supposed to supervise our pension. And this is what we are saying. We should be able to rise up as workers because we don't have a say as to who manages our pension. If this is our future, people are wallowing in poverty after serving this country. Those that we vote for, what is their lifestyle after they exit office? Workers must begin to ensure that, look, where our money goes, that is supposed to take care of our pensions. We should have a say in who is appointed. We should have a say in what they do as the board. We should have a say in the type of investment that they go into. And if it is lost around your line of duty, we must hold you accountable. That is the only reason that we will have as workers to say our future could be secured.
Now, Dr. Yankson, he just made the thing easier for me. He's talking about what we having a say in what decision, for instance, NET takes on our behalf, the one who manages the contributions. Now, how easy does the law make this? Are there provisions for me, the contributor, to be able to take, to be part of the decisions that will be taken on my behalf?
If you look at it, generally, the key provision in there will be that of the representation of the contributors on the board of the SNIT, of SNIT as an organization. So the worker representatives are the ones who can actually influence policy direction within the organization. But when it comes to day-to-day management, of course, aside the workers of SNIT themselves, the rest of the workers in Ghana generally are not part of the management or operational activities. So it really makes it a bit difficult when it comes to that angle. The law does not specifically say that, well, you, Aisha, because you're a contributor, when it comes to decision making, you definitely will have to be part of that process. The law hasn't spelled it out that way, but like I said, through the representation of workers on the board, that is done. But it is instructive to know that this is a trust. So the trust itself, or the board of trustees, the organization, is actually holding the money in trust on behalf of the contributor. The money actually belongs to the contributor. If you look at the law says that once your funds are deducted by your employer within the 14-day limit that the employer has to remit to SNIT, they hold it in trust for you, as in the organization you work with. Once that money is paid to SNIT, invest in you. So it is your property. The monies out there are the properties of the workers, the contributors. So, per principle, it is just fair that the contributors will have a good say when it comes to ensuring that the operations of the trust is going the way we all want to. That is not to say that trust hasn't done any good. No, there are a lot of good things that in the last couple of years we've all seen. But there are also areas that objectively we need to look and address. And I think that if there is room, based on the lessons we have learned all this while, anytime it gets to some reforms through amendments to the Act or what have you, naturally some of these lessons will have to be taken along to ensure that the people who own the trust also have a lot more say.
Definitely, there's also the bit about transiting from tier 1 to tier 2. That has given rise to a lot of issues. One of them is the payment of past credits, which the SNIT says that if it does, it will collapse the, the outfit. What has been the challenge with this, Dr. Yankson?
Well, I think this ordinarily should have been a very straightforward issue. What it is that the law said your past credit, that is what was due you as an employee if you were on the team all the way to 31st December 2009. The component that ultimately, which is about 25%, which you would have elected for SNIT to pay to you as a lump sum, should be worked out through a formula to be agreed on by the regulator and SNIT. And then those funds were supposed to be paid on your behalf to the Tier 2 scheme that you've joined. But like you rightly said, at the time that these things happened, clearly SNIT's position was that they had invested these funds, some of them in long-term, kinds of investments, real estate, what have you. And it would have been very difficult to liquidate all of it within that short period and same paid to the Tier 2 schemes, for which reason some sort of election and discussions between SNIT, the regulator, happened, and a decision at that time was made that at least on temporary basis, SNIT should continue to hold the past credit. But the key issue that came up were how were the interest components going to be worked on, especially, or the returns on those funds, especially moving from 2010 to date or to the future, that so long as SNIT holds, what rates of return should be applicable to those funds. And I think that is one area that generated a lot of debate, discussions, and misunderstanding at some point. By and large, some arrangements are in place, but clearly, if the funds were with the Tier 2 schemes, looking at the returns that on paper and in practice, the Tier 2 schemes are returning now, most likely those funds would have had better returns if they were with the Tier 2 funds, if you look at the returns that the Tier 2 group is making now, vis-a-vis the sort of return arrangements that are in place now. So it's an area that is still not concluded.
Issues or somewhat dissatisfaction with data in respect of the TPFI. Mr. Francis Salah, have you been provided some data already on this?
No, really. This issue about past credit, I think you remember, I think 2 years ago when we were promised by government that they were going to ensure payment of this past credit. But until that is redeemed, we will still not have any good information to share. The Tier 2 currently with the fund managers are doing very well. We are monitoring those ones. Those on Tier 3 as well, which is voluntary. We can only speak to that on those who are contributing that one. And because it's voluntary, it's not all employers who are willing. It has to be subject to various negotiations before that is reached. But a few who are saying again, these have become avenues for workers to go in for such funds to prepare themselves for their pending, pension. People are using those funds to kind of put up some form of accommodation for themselves. So the Tier 2, Tier 3 now, however, we are on it. We are ensuring its prudent management, and because it's not in the hands of SNIT, that is why I would say that is being managed. But what is in contention now is what is in the hands of SNIT. Yeah, but that past credit, until government redeems its promise, no light at that situation as we speak. So we hope and pray that that promise will be redeemed, and then we'll see the way forward.
Mr. Blaso, do you know why this information or this data hasn't been out for the operators?
Difficult, really. You really cannot understand why data or information should not be available to the institutions or the contributors in the institutions who made the contributions. It's a very worrying development, and many people are asking questions and are not getting answers. It beats my imagination. In fact, my understanding. I can't understand how data will not be available for persons who require it, for persons to whom it applies. And the regulatory authority should ensure that these are responded to appropriately.
I needed to explain to us how much of importance this data is, especially to the tier 3.
Well, I think that on this data business, we need to put things in the right perspective. The data that you refer to, the TTFA data, is actually supposed to be the contributions and the returns that workers earned between the period 1st January 2010 till the funds were transferred to the appropriate tier 2 schemes. Now, because those monies were kept at the Bank of Ghana in what has now become known as the TPFA, the Temporary Pension Fund account, which technically speaking was under the purview of the regulator, whatever contributions that came from individual organizations on behalf of the workers, there should have been a very clear data saying that on this day you contributed so much as Aisha, and on the particular next month or 2 or 3 or whatever, this is how much you contributed. There should have been a statement of your contributions month on month, followed by the appropriate returns over the period of the contribution. The summation of the two would have given you your balance at any given time. Unfortunately, you could see from the chaos that we've all gone through that data keeping from 2010 till the funds were transferred, especially for the public sector, somewhere 2017, was not the best, for which reason the regulator has actually engaged a firm or a consultancy to do that job. That job has been done to a large extent with the involvement of the Tier 2 pension schemes as well as labor. But the problem is that there is no finality, and that is what creates the problem. Because as we see today, I cannot actually verify or have a statement of my contributions from 1st January till somewhere September 2016, together with the returns. But that shouldn't be so. With the Tier 2 arrangement, a click of the button should give me access to my statement. I should know how much I have contributed month on month, the returns I have made. If there are any defaulting months, i.e. months that no contributions went through, I should be able to ask my employer who actually take these things as source and remit same to the schemes. If you don't have data, you cannot resolve some of the problems. Data will even help you ultimately to even know the exact worth of, say, a particular fund. And without data, you just work with approximations. And sometimes, or in most times, it might not be the best because that is not what it ought to be.
You've mentioned and you've indicated how important the pension regulatory scheme or the pension scheme is to our national development agenda. How do we move on from here? Because which way you look at it, we need to find solutions to the problems that face us at this moment so we can better the pension scheme.
Well, I think it is very simple. We have run the 3 tiers pension arrangement for a while. And I think where we faltered as a state as a country, we are all very much aware, especially those of us who find ourselves in the pension arena. We are very much aware of where things haven't gone right. The act itself that set up the three-tier pension arrangement was done with a certain background in mind. In practice, as we say, the letter and the spirit of the law, has it been applied the way they ought to be? Current developments and events that have occurred, do they necessitate that we look at aspects of the law, change them, amend them, tighten them? I think it is about time we begin to have a conversation. Almost 20 years or 11, 12 years down the line, about 11, 12 years down the line, we need to have a conversation as to possible areas of amendment, if any, and then the focus should be that we try and implement the full details of the Pensions Act. There's a portion for unification of pensions. Unfortunately, that hasn't happened, and there's been a lot of hula baloo about it. We need to start looking at all these things to ensure that there is fair and equitable distribution of funds that belong to workers, that belong to the state, in terms of when you retire and what ought to go to you. This segregation and different kinds of pension arrangements all over the place sometimes also lead to problems for all of us. So we need to take a holistic view of the practice throughout the period from 2010 till date, and then the act itself, as well as the management and the handling of things over the period based on the lessons we have learned. I think that is what we need to do quickly and tighten the knots so that we can make good progress and involve everybody. It should be possible for every single Ghanaian to have a pension because it is key. Everybody at some point will retire in life.
Mr. Blaso, we were all here when the issue about the financial services, the collapse of some banks, and we saw the impact. We don't want that to happen, and that's why people are asking whether there's ever been sanctions for the trustee companies managing Tier 3, for instance. How do you want the regulator to regulate this sector, for instance, so we don't see, especially what we saw in the financial sector, happening in the pension sector?
Hello, Aisha.
Yeah.
Would it require that the regulator ensures periodic submission of reports without fee from all in the sector? And there must be strict sanctions against defaulting companies. Otherwise, we won't see prudent management in pensions. But we've operated this three-tier scheme since 2010. And it's about time we got together to look at how far we've gone, whether the objective really of the reforms have been met. And clearly when they have not been met, what we do to ensure that workers look forward to pension with delight. And then there is a lot of unfinished business to deal with. We had unification of pensions on the cards. What has happened to that? And to achieve this objective, Vice President Bawumia inaugurated a committee that was to work towards the unification of pensions. Why has that objective been abandoned? These are critical issues that we need to look at. And we need to salvage the scheme because it's workers' lag and toil that is in the scheme. In the scheme, the money is in there belong to the members who contribute to it.
All right, and let me pick my last words from Mr. Salah. Mr. Salah, what exactly do you want to see going forward? Because you have indicated that your members have a lot of complaints with this, the operation of the scheme.
First of all, most of those interested in getting news on pensions are 50 years and above. That is when people are ready to listen to these pension issues. But I think that it is time that all workers rally around the flag on pensions so that we can be able to make meaningful decisions, meaningful input, meaningful contributions into what we are paying now into those funds, so that those who are supposed to listen and work with it be able to take it up and make sure it works. People should not be sitting around a fence and then waiting for them to get to such age, a time that they will be getting to go on pensions before they'll be asking questions. That is why we are at where we are. Wherever we are, once you start contributing into pensions, be interested in knowing where that money goes into, how it's being invested. If it's lost around the way, what caused it? If it is a human error, how do we address it? If it's not a human error, what happened? Who are appointed to head those institutions? What stake do I have? Do they have? Then we all rally around that flag. This is the only way, as workers, we can make a very meaningful impact on these discussions when it comes to future social security benefits. Thank you.
I'm grateful for your time. Francis Salah is with the TUC. Seth Blaso is a labor consultant, and Dr. Justice Yangson is with GMA and also the National Pensions Regulatory Board. I'm grateful that you all joined.